Hey everybody, my name is Kyle Strickland. I'm the director of My Brother's Keeper Ohio, and I'm with The Ohio State University. And joining me today are representatives from all across the state, from places like Akron, Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Springfield, and Youngstown, leaders who are committed to our young people's success and doing transformative work in our communities. We're also joined by our special guest and partner in this work, Senator Sherrod Brown.
In 2015, President Obama asked me to begin to help him by helping to create initiatives for My Brother's Keeper all over my state. We have created, I believe, more My Brother's Keeper initiatives in Ohio than any state but one, about a dozen My Brother's Keeper initiatives, and we've enlisted community leaders in Fortune 500 companies, museums, libraries, national sports teams, even though Ohio national sports teams lose more often than they win, all to expand opportunity for young men of color. From sports management programs and mentorships to mental wellness discussions designed to break down the stigma surrounding mental health, to the creation of a digital library of specially curated books by African American authors. MBK Ohio is broadening horizons for communities across our state. When we say Black Lives Matter, we mean Black careers matter, we mean Black stories matter, we mean Black dreams matter. That's why I'm so proud to be part of My Brother's Keeper. I'm Sherrod Brown. I am My Brother's Keeper.
Hello, I'm Antonio Smith, Youth Services Liaison and City Lead for Cities United and My Brother's Keeper at the City of Brooklyn Park. Over the past 4 years, our MBK efforts have engaged a youth mentoring program that is reimagining public safety and policing. This is done through continuous work involved and engaged in a research project that's citywide. I am My Brother's Keeper.
Hi, I'm Willie Barney with the Empowerment Network in partnership with MBK of the Heartland and the National MBK Alliance. We are delighted that over the past few years, we've been working together with the Obama Foundation and MBK Alliance to make sure that the young men of our city who are bold and brilliant have an opportunity to get involved in career exploration, entrepreneurship, internships, and jobs. And we've seen many of them, hundreds of them, move on to college and also get expanded opportunities in building drones and construction, getting involved in entrepreneurship, starting businesses, getting into the workforce. So we're delighted to be a part of the National MBK Alliance, and we're incredibly excited to see our young men, when given an opportunity, to be incredibly successful. I am My Brother's Keeper.
Well, hello, everybody. I am so excited to be here. My name is Valerie Jarrett. I'm the president of the Obama Foundation, and I want to welcome you to day 2 of our MBK Leadership Forum. Welcome back for another day of inspiration. I thought yesterday was amazing, and we know that given the lineup we have with us today is going to be exactly as inspirational. And thank you all for tuning in and participating. First, I want y'all to give it up for our DJ Omay. DJ Omay, oh my gosh, how much energy, and the tunes were amazing. So show him a little love, drop some kindness in the chat for our youth MC. I also want to mention for our youth MCs, both Senegal and Alejandra, they are extraordinary young men already out there changing the world. So show them some love too. I want to begin on a more somber note, and that is expressing my condolences about the tragic mass shooting we saw in San Jose just yesterday. Another horrific shooting in America. It is an epidemic of gun violence that we're experiencing in cities and towns and rural communities across our country. MBK San Jose is important to us. It's one of our early MBK communities. And so not only do we send our condolences to those who've lost family members, to those who are grieving around the country, but we also say we have to recommit ourselves to fight this epidemic, and that we honor them best by ending this epidemic. And so we call on everybody, we just have to redouble our efforts, both on the ground, in our laws at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. We all have to have an all hands on deck to end this scourge of violence in our country. which is what brings us here today, because you all give me hope. And in fact, as President Obama said yesterday, remarking on the events of last year as we passed the first anniversary of the death of George Floyd, that we saw, record demonstrations around our country, people of all ages, of all backgrounds, of all races coming together and saying Black Lives Matter. And that what gave him hope and what gives me hope is that it wasn't just an inflection point. It was an ongoing movement. And as we saw over the course of yesterday, and as I'm confident we will see today, there are real, tangible solutions that you all have come up with and are implementing. I'm particularly glad to have mayors involved in our effort because I started my career in local government working for Mayor Harold Washington. He was the first African-American mayor of Chicago, and I joined in the beginning of his second term. And what motivated me to go into government is, having grown up in Chicago, I wanted to give back to a city that I love and it had given me so much. But I also grew up understanding the divisions in the city, the geography that isolated people who were poor. I grew up on the South Side, just a couple miles from where the Obama Center is going to be located. And I spent my youth, riding my bike over the very site where it will be located. But I also saw how historically there have been disinvestments on the south and west sides of Chicago. And I always wondered, driving up and down Lakeshore Drive that connects one end of the city to the other, why is North Lakeshore Drive so beautiful with amenities and restaurants and great housing and retail? And why has the south side of Chicago been neglected? We have seen investments since the time Mayor Washington was elected, but what this Obama Center will do is infuse a whole new energy to the south side, a community I call home. Now, I want to also share with you that I began being involved with My Brother's Keeper before it existed. I was there with President Obama in the White House after the verdict in the Zimmerman trial, where tearfully he said to all Americans, we have got to do better than this. We have to do something so that young Black boys and young men in our country are not unable to walk down the street or drive in a car without people fearing them. We have to improve the trajectories of their lives. We have to do something to say broadly to boys and young men of color, we believe in you. You are our child, and we are our brother's keeper, each and every one of us, myself included. And so I was so proud when he launched it while still in office, and I'm even more proud to see all of the incredible work that has taken place over the course of the years that it has been in place, and to see mayors and community residents and business leaders and foundations and experts who studied issues of how we can improve their trajectory all coming together and sharing those best practices, and also being willing to have hard conversations. One of the young men yesterday said something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, but change happens when we go 2 steps past our comfort zone. And I think what this current climate demands is for us to have those conversations that have been long overdue, but not just the talk, but walking the walk. When we talk about President Obama's charge last year to our nation's mayors to say, work with your communities to see what is that contract between you and them around the use of force. What do you all together think is how we address just that issue? Recognizing that police violence against the Black community is just a microcosm of society, and that there's something everyone should do. But our nation's mayors responded. Hundreds of them came up with new ideas and solutions for how we can reimagine policing and how we keep our communities safe. And so this is what gives me such great hope. And I want to say that what we have here today is a forum all about change and all about inspiration. And when we end this day's forum, I know it won't just be about words, it'll be about action. It'll be about inspiration. It'll be about giving people the tools that they need to go forward and do something different than they did before this forum. One of the whole central focuses of the Obama Foundation is to create a platform to help the next generation of leaders. Those of you who will be participating today, yes, Senegal, I see you nodding your head. You are the next generation. I'm the older generation. And so I want to say, here's the baton. We're there to give you our wise counsel. You're here to ignore it if you think you know better. But this is a platform for change. It's a platform for engagement. It's a platform to have tools that allow you to not only have a great idea and not only implement that idea, but make sure that you spread the impact more broadly. And so not just connecting you all with us so we can learn, but connecting you with each other. And that's where the magic happens. And that's what makes me so proud to lead this organization at this unique moment in time. So I want to say to you all, we're ready to get started. And just as I said earlier, Senegal, I'm going to hand the baton to you to do the work. I'm also going to hand the baton to you to continue with the conversation today. Welcome back, everyone. Enjoy our conference, our forum, but please, please continue the work after today. That's what this is all about. Senegal, on to you.
We'll hear a little bit from Senegal coming up right after this spotlight video. So
you're right. Alejandra.
It's all right. It's all right.
Looking at Senegal. I forgot to introduce Alejandra. See, that's why you need to take the baton. Alejandra, it's on to you. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Valerie. We're thrilled to have you here to keep the community spotlights going and to get us started thinking about the importance of policy reform for MBK communities. Let's take a look at MBK San Antonio and how their leadership table has gathered all of the right power players and aligned on a shared policy agenda that's created lasting systemic change for the boys and young men of color. San Antonio, take it away.
Hello, Michelle Ogalia-Holland. I'm the Director of Policy for Mayor Nierenberg here in San Antonio. I am a member of the policy table for My Brother's Keeper San Antonio.
My name is Morgan Craven. I'm the National Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Community Engagement at IDRA and a member of the leadership table of My Brother's Keeper San Antonio.
Hi, I'm Jill Mata, Chief Juvenile Probation Officer, the Bexar County Juvenile Probation Department here in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm a proud member of the MBK Leadership Table.
A successful partnership and collaboration has to have a strong governance structure with clearly defined roles and plenty of time for relationship building, because San Antonio is a very relationship town. And when folks are expected to work together, it helps if they trust and know each other. But our structure has really ensured the sustainability of our collective efforts. My Brother's Keeper San Antonio's network structure is made up of 3 levels of system leadership, 3 work groups, an anchor team, and the leadership table. The leadership table has the authority to allocate resources and shape policy as a joint network at their institutions. The policy component of the work is where I and this panel of leaders sit. We originally started as an ad hoc of the leadership table and thought we would simply conduct a quick policy review to share back with the larger group. However, when you put women, especially a majority of women of color, in a room together, you're going to get more than a policy review, and our structure allows us to make space for that. So we did the review and incorporated clear actions for each cross-sector leader. Additionally, I will note the ad hoc was offered to the entire leadership table, and just so happened that those who opted into this policy committee were all women. Once we knew that, we immediately began to strategize how to expand the table. The table now operates as a joint youth and adult table. The backbone coordinated a partnership with our local community college's male mentorship program. And now we have up to 2 paid representatives from each of the 5 Alamo College campuses who serve on this table and help shape our work.
So the leaders who serve on our policy committee work on policy regularly. Some of us are from different sectors and levels of policy, but we are all committed to policies that promote safe and supportive schools and advance post-secondary success for boys and young men of color. Our policy agenda took about a year to build, and we thought it was really important to devote that amount of time to it because we wanted to be thoughtful about our recommendations and the related action steps. We also had to adjust to COVID-19 issues and make sure our recommendations were responsive to the pandemic. to the racial justice issues that a lot of people were rightfully focusing on during the time we were developing the policy agenda. And we have 31 cross-sector institutional partners, over 300 people in our membership, and a broader community who we wanted to be fully invested in the agenda. So in order to get to this point, we needed a committee that was able to work with young people, review policy recommendations, and make the final recommendations that could be used by every partner at any level, and we wanted everyone to feel comfortable implementing the agenda. So the recommendations in our policy agenda are broad in order for us to use the agenda at multiple levels and across multiple years, and each recommendation has concrete action steps that anyone can take. So for example, the legislature here in Texas meets every 2 years. We are currently in a legislative session, and My Brother's Keeper San Antonio was able to use our recommendations as a guide to what we wanted to endorse during the legislative session, and as a guide to our work with other MBK partners across the state. So our recommendations are absolutely applicable to state policies, but again, they're also useful at other levels outside of the legislative session. And finally, I'll say that an important value to our governance structure and policy agenda is that we are able to move very quickly. We have pre-approval from the executive leaders for our policy agenda. And so the path is really cleared for us to do and support really excellent policy work with and for boys and young men of color.
Well, you know, being together in a room, being in the leadership table and being together in a room with these important stakeholders such as education, justice, community development, the county leaders that are in the room with us, very important advocates. This allows us to make meaningful progress. Some examples of that are the restorative justice work that we're doing in detention. We, in our juvenile detention facility, we are mirroring and supporting the school district's efforts by embracing this restorative justice training, the specific training that they're using in the schools in San Antonio. And so that allows our detention center staff to be more fully informed and kind of on the same page with the kids. And then the students are also using that same practice that's being used in the schools. So we find that to be really helpful. We also have like a specialty court, a boys specialty court, which is unique in San Antonio. And that specialty court for young boys, it helps us focus and look at those kids as a special cohort and individually apply our best practices. And that court, we are fortunate enough to have that court presided over by a male judge of color. So we've really seen some important outcomes from that and progress from that. Regarding state policy shifts, there was really a misunderstanding in the schools that certain behaviors resulted in mandatory removals or expulsions to the Juvenile Justice Academy. And actually, the education code in Texas allowed for more discretion making in those decisions. And so we really worked hard to make those exceptions and that discretionary ability known to the schools. And so we're working on those pieces with new legislation. So those are just some of the things that we've been able to accomplish by our work with the leadership table.
I am my brother's keeper.
I am my brother's keeper.
I am my brother's keeper.
Video. Awesome. See, to make that kind of change, you need money, you need power, and you need respect. First, you get the money, then you get the power, then after you get the power, then you can make the social impact. Passion and dedication, we know, does not pay the salaries of the great change makers trying to do the work. It also doesn't draft the legislation that transforms outcomes for our students or builds new youth centers. So for this plenary session, we brought together change makers that are at the forefront of leveraging money and power to create social change. Our first plenary of two will focus on power, then we'll go to money. And for this first plenary, we brought together two new mayors breaking barriers, defying race, age, and gender to lead iconic American cities and MBK communities. So please join me in welcoming the mayor of Baltimore, Maryland, Brandon Scott, the mayor of St. Louis, Missouri, Tishaura Jones, and representing our partner, our co-host, our thought partners from the National League of Cities, Leon Andrews. Everybody give them some warm love in the chat, all right? Looking forward to an awesome plenary session.
Thank you. Thank you, Senegal. That was a great introduction. Just hearing your leadership, and also Alejandra, just really appreciate your leadership yesterday and today. Just want to give you guys such big shout outs. And I have to also give a big shout out to DJ Ome. She has been incredible. I love the energy that they've been bringing today and yesterday. And so it's my honor and privilege to spend some time with two incredible mayors. As you heard from Senegal, my name is Leon Andrews. I'm at the National League of Cities, and I lead all of our work on race, equity, and leadership. And I actually, for the last 8 years, am honored to have led all of our Boys and Men of Color work that we've launched here at the National League of Cities 8 years ago with mayors and city leaders across the country. And we have two incredible mayors. I want to introduce them first, give them their honors, their due. So you have first Mayor Tishaura Jones. Mayor Tishaura Jones, she was sworn in as the 47th mayor and actually the first Black female mayor in the city's history. And last month on April 20th, 2021, transparency, integrity, service, that defines who Mayor Jones is and how she did it. Since 2012, Mayor Jones has helped the city of St. Louis earn and save over $30 million and still counting. With a deep personal commitment, a wealth of experience, and a proven track record of leadership, Mayor Jones started her career as a public servant in 2002 when she was appointed as Democratic Committee woman of the 8th Ward in the city of St. Louis. She's a history maker on a mission. If you really look at all that she has done, it's incredible just to kind of lift up her leadership. She served 2 terms in the Missouri House of Representatives, where she was selected as the first Black woman in Missouri history to hold the position of Assistant Minority Floor Leader. She's also the first Black woman to serve as Treasurer of St. Louis. So I love her trailblazing history. Mayor Jones, she has a bachelor's degree from finance, as I joked with her, from that other Hampton HU called Hampton University, all in joke. I'm a graduate of Howard University, so we do that in love. And she has a master's degree in health administration from St. Louis University School of Public Health. So really excited to have Mayor Jones with us. And also want to introduce a good friend and brother who's been engaged with the National League of Cities for so many years, now mayor of the city of Baltimore, Brandon Scott. He was elected the 52nd mayor of Baltimore last year, November 3rd. And previously, he was unanimously elected president of Baltimore City Council by his colleagues a year before that, May of 2019. And so as council president, Mayor Scott developed and released the first ever legislative agenda for council president, which is what we've been really lifting up his leadership on, building safer, stronger communities and cleaning up the city of government, investing in Baltimore's young people, which you'll hear from him, his passion for young people and also centering equity. Prior to that, Mayor Scott served on city council representing Baltimore's 2nd district. He was first elected in 2012 at the age of 27, which was one of the youngest people ever elected to serve in Baltimore City Council. In early 2018, then Council Member Scott introduced and passed a monumental legislation on equity in Baltimore. His equity assessment program law will require all city agencies to operate through a lens of equity and require all operating budgets, capital budgets, and proposed legislation to be weighed through an equity lens. And so you heard from Senegal that these mayors, when we talk about power and influence, really are excited for them to really talk about what that looks like, particularly as we're talking about the intentionality about focusing on boys and men of color. And to really want to start there, and really want to go to you, Mayor Scott, first, to really talk about that commitment that you have to boys and men of color, whether it's coming from a personal perspective or even as an elected official. Would love for you to just kind of speak to your commitment and why it's important, you think, as the mayor as a leader to be talking about and focusing on boys and men of color?
Well, thank you, Leon. It's an honor for me to share the stage with my sister, Mayor Jones, for the first time, with her being the mayor of St. Louis. So this is a great day for me. I want to thank everyone at MBK, both nationally, but here in Baltimore. I want to thank Mark Brody, our MBK Baltimore chair, for his great work. For me, Leon, I think it's very clear. I am a man of color. I was not that long ago a young man of color here in Baltimore. And I always talk about this work, the importance of this work through the lens of how I understand the world. A few weeks ago in my childhood neighborhood called Park Heights, the world descended on it for this horse race known as Preakness. And then imagine living in that neighborhood as a child and seeing that your neighborhood is literally the center of the sports world, right? For one day. And every other day of the year, you weren't even seen as human. You had to deal with. The first time I saw someone get shot, I wasn't 10 years old. You had to live with going to schools with no heating air. You had to live with no opportunities in careers, losing friends, seeing people dealing with substance abuse. That's what pushed me into service. But that's also why this work is so important, because we know those disparities still exist in our city. And they start once, even before they are born, right? 2 out of 3 Black boys here in Baltimore enter kindergarten unprepared. 1 out of 3 of our high school students in Baltimore don't graduate. And nearly all, 94% of the juveniles entering, young people entering the justice system are Black. That shows you that we have to do this work, because I know as a young man who came up through that, I know as someone who coached basketball and track here and helped so many young boys of color exceed and reach their highest heights, the only way that we're going to make sure that all of them, because they are our greatest asset, but we have been a city, and we've been cities and a country and states really that have been investing in the failure of young boys and men of color instead of investing in their promise. That's why this work is so important. They don't have to be making up 1/3 of our homicide victims. We have to start to invest in them in a very intense way so that we can become the best version of ourselves. That's why the work is important to me.
Thank you for that, Mayor Scott. And just really talking about how important it is to speak to the data, right? The data doesn't lie. As Mayor Scott just is laying out the data and why it's important to be intentional about understanding data as we're driving this work. So thank you for naming that. Mayor Jones, I'd love to hear from you why you think this is important work for you as a mayor, a new incoming mayor, the commitment that you're making to driving outcomes for boys and men of color.
So thank you again for having me. And yes, it is wonderful to share the stage with my brother, Mayor Brandon Scott. And, you know, Baltimore and St. Louis are a lot alike. People say that all over the country. And unfortunately, the other place where we are alike is our hypersegregation and our outcomes for boys and men of color, especially Black men and boys. And I come to this as the mother of the most adorable 13-year-old son, Aiden. And one day we were having a conversation about what the mayor does. This was before I took office, actually before I even ran. And he said, you know, I was going through all of the departments and the things the mayor is responsible for. And when I got to the police, he says, oh, you'll be over the police. And I said, yes, Mommy will be over the police. And he says, well, that means I'll be safe. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, because my son should not have to think that the only way for him to be safe with interactions with law enforcement is for his mother to become the mayor. And how many young Black boys does that happen to? Like 1 in a million. So then that also sort of changed my focus. Like, how can I create an environment where our law enforcement sees our young Black men, our young Black boys as boys, that they have the space and the opportunity to make mistakes and still live to tell about it. Because Adam Toledo, whether or not you think he was right or wrong for being out at 2:30 in the morning, we won't talk about that, but he should not have lost his life for the mistake that he made. And we have to create an environment with our law enforcement communities that sees our children as children. And I come to this work as the mother of a Black son, trying to change the environment for Black kids like him so they can thrive and learn and grow and tell stories to their grandbabies one day about the things that they experienced and how their lives changed because mayors like Mayor Scott and I cared enough to change the environment for them to live.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Mayor Jones, and shout out to Aiden. I love your 13-year-old teenager, and I got 3 daughters, so give them shout out to my 3 girls as well. And I appreciate what both of you bring a personal lens of why this is important, but I also want, just before I pivot, to talk about more specifically what this work looks like. Your colleagues across the country, mayors that may not have lived experiences, right? Mayors that that may not be a mayor of color, may not have a child of color, and they may be listening in right now, or we're trying to help other mayors or elected officials make this case of this commitment and drive for outcomes of boys and men of color. And I say that because I worry about losing the momentum, right? As everything is happening across this country and people's attention spans are focusing on so many different things and being framed in a different way. How would you communicate to your colleagues, your mayors, or other even council members about why they still need to be committed to an agenda for boys and men of color? And I want to ask, maybe start with Mayor Jones this time, and then I'll go back to Mayor Scott. So Mayor Jones?
I think the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor sparked or rebirthed a movement that had already been started back in 2014 with the death of Mike Brown. And every one of us that are leading cities have had a situation where a Black or brown person has been killed at the hands of police and has been unarmed. So I think that we have to look at those moments and look at this moment right now and not lose momentum, because the health and the health of our communities relies on us doing something different. We cannot continue to invest in the same things over and over and over again and expect a different result. And we're seeing that especially in policing of Black and brown communities. And so you're seeing mayors shift to the left to make sure that we're investing in things that keep our people and our communities safe, like more social workers, more mental health counselors, more substance abuse counselors, to invest in things that keep people safe. Because research done right here in St. Louis and our North Patrol District showed that up to 50% of calls can be answered by someone other than police. Mm-hmm. So how do we invest in those resources and also free up police to do police-involved work? They are exhausted, so we need to free them up to do the work that they were trained to do in our academies, and also give them more resources in the form of other licensed professionals to take care of people when they call us, when they're in need.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that, Mayor Jones. And Mayor Scott, what about you? How would you communicate to your colleagues that may not have a personal story to this, but you're making the case of why they should still be committed to drive outcomes for boys and men of color?
Well, the first thing I would say is ditto to everything that Mayor Jones said. So I don't have to repeat any of that. She said it so eloquently. But because we started off with a little bit of hip hop, I'm going to say this, and you said it once already. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. The numbers will tell you that if you want your city to be the best version of itself, then you have to invest in the success of young men and boys of color. And also, it's the right thing to do. And if you are not willing, as you hear Mayor Jones say, in this moment of reckoning, where it's in front of your face, you can no longer hide. The world is telling you each and every day that this is an issue, and people are not just going to be silently suffering anymore. Then you have to really do that gut check. You have to do that reality check of if this work is truly for you. But I believe that that most folks who are doing this work really want to see it happen. And what they have to do is be willing to make people uncomfortable. I always tell folks consistently, especially as we're trying to partner with the businesses and the communities here in Baltimore, I said, the one thing that I'm going to do is make people uncomfortable, because no one should be comfortable with the way our city has existed, at least for the 37 years that I've been breathing and well beyond that. And we have to do that in a way that fosters partnership, that engages our young people, that uses the power of mayor's offices to bring people together to do things differently. We know what doesn't work. We now have to be willing to have the courage to do the right thing over the popular one, even if it costs us our jobs, to make sure that we're building a better foundation, not thinking about reelection, thinking about the communities that you serve 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, and invest in the success of boys and young men of color, because it will make your city a better place.
I love that. Love that. How are we leaving a legacy, right? In this, in the roles that we play in our society? Because how will people look back at us, as we set that legacy? I appreciate you naming that, Mayor Scott. And so I want to lean in on that a little bit. Let's talk more specifically about what does it look like to make people uncomfortable to do this work? What does it look like if we're going to really do this work about improving outcomes from boys and men of color? I'd love for each of you to start to elaborate on specific things, programs, initiatives, policies, systems work that you feel that that you're currently trying to take on. I know both of you are relatively new mayors, so by no means am I suggesting you should have figured it out in a year's time, but love for you to speak to maybe stuff that's on your platform right now, or things that you maybe previously have worked on that you think will drive that kind of systems change for boys and men of color. And so I want to start with you, Mayor Scott, first, and then I'll ask Mayor Jones.
Yeah, I think here we have started some great things, right? We have an office in my office called the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. We also have within that office the African American office, African American male engagement. And really what that office does is the tough work, right? They do our MBK work. We have a newly established MBK Baltimore Board of Directors, but inside our Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, we have what we call a children's cabinet, Leon, where we're focused on specific outcomes and how we're going to target specific outcomes for our boys and men of color and all of our young people in Baltimore. But what that really means, though, is that you have to think about the systems building that we're doing, right? The things that we're doing. For example, we know breaking down these barriers for our young people. We're currently working on what we call a pre-arrest diversion program for our young people, so that they never even get into the system, that we're sending them to other things through our partnership with Children and Family Success, our police, our state's attorney, and also our Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, making sure that we're also barriers that we know young people face for career, right? Getting them IDs, getting them social security cards, making sure that they are getting all of our workforce opportunities here in Baltimore City. We have to continue that work. We have joined Mayors for Guaranteed Income, where we're going to be focusing in on families to make sure that we're giving them the support that they need. And through this pandemic, the work that we've done in our cash assistance, all of that work has work that will lead to more things. And of course, Leon, you mentioned it, the tough part, right? It's going to be the systems building. As we now, we talked about my equity legislation. We are now doing what we call the implementation phase, because it wasn't implemented before, where we're going to be forcing agencies to do that tough work, where they're going to have to redo their policies, and then using African American male engagement to do the great work that they have been doing, right? We have in Baltimore these young men and women too, but mostly young men who squeegee or clean windows, and people love to complain about it, but you know, if I was out there making $200 a day, I'll be doing it myself too. But having them engage with those young men, get them trained for other jobs, get them reconnected to school, making sure that their families have the resources and wraparound services that they need through a 5-day-a-week employment, complemented by programming from agencies, conflict resolutions, self-respect, building trust, college, career, and financial planning for them. That's some of the tough work that we're doing. We have much more to go.
Yeah, it sounds like a full plate. And I'm wondering too, Mayor Scott, before I go to Mayor Jones, resistance, navigating through that as you're trying to do it. I mean, I love the structures in place, the Children Cabinet, the MBK Board of Directors. Is there places where you have to leverage your leadership to navigate where people are pushing back? Well, why are we focusing in on boys and men of color? And that you're pushing back and navigating through that. I'm wondering if you have that, experiencing that, and how you're navigating through that.
Well, the reality is I be very blunt and direct with folks when they come to me and say, well, we got to do something about these kids. I say, well, this is what we're doing. We're not going to do what you guys did. We're not turning back the clock to what you did when I was a kid, when anytime I came outside, I could just be put in handcuffs just because y'all thought that I was going to do something. We know that didn't work. Our city didn't become safer. We didn't help our communities become better, and many of them in worse condition because families have been locked out from employment and career opportunities because of how you did it. No, we're going to work with families in a more intense way, helping people with the things that they need, not just criminalizing everyone. And if folks want to get on board with that, they will. If not, they won't. And we're going to work with the folks who are at the table using the power of my office to do things differently, because that's what we ran on and that's how we're going to operate.
Yeah, so important that the influence that mayors can have in situations like that. So appreciate you sharing that. Mayor Jones, can you give you a moment as well? I know, again, you're about a month in, so I'm not by any, but I'm wondering your vision as well as you speak to the programs, initiatives, policies you want to see for boys and men of color.
Yes, I'm 37 days in to be exact. But this is something that, obviously I've thought of and have tried to do. In my previous work as treasurer, I started the Office of Financial Empowerment and started the nation's second largest children's savings program called College Kids, which gives a $50 college savings account to every kindergarten student entering a public school in the city of St. Louis. We currently have over 18,000 children with over $1.5 million saved for their futures. We know that children with savings accounts with less than $500 saved are 3 times more likely to go to college and 4 times more likely to complete college than children without savings. So it's not what's in the account, it's the presence of the account that makes the difference. But also we add to that account when they and their families do good things like match savings, good attendance, and parents' participation in financial education courses offered through our Office of Financial Empowerment. And anecdotally, we're seeing changes because we use the child as an entry point to the family. So we are seeing them improve their credit scores because nothing changes your life more than God or love or 100-point increase in your credit score. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
And we also see that they are opening accounts for themselves and other children and their families and increasing their own financial capability. But also, we also have a director of children and families in the mayor's office. That person has been in this position for about a year, and we're glad to have them continue to work in our office. And the things that they're doing are very similar to the things that are happening in Baltimore. But we also have an unprecedented opportunity in front of us. I think Baltimore and St. Louis are receiving probably the 2 highest amounts from the American Recovery Plan Act. We're receiving over $500 million. And so we're looking at ways to invest those funds to see returns for many, many years to come. And just yesterday, I was talking with my staff about how can we help Black men with their child support arrearages, because that's one of the #1 things that keeps Black men out of the workforce. As a single mom myself, I happen to have a father of my son's father happens to be a really good guy, but I will say that we have had some challenges and have worked through them. But the one thing I didn't want to do was set up a situation where he would not be able to provide for himself, because if he can't provide for himself, he can't provide for my son. And so we need to take that viewpoint for other fathers who are out here who unfortunately will leave employment after child support catches up with them. And so how can we develop a fund to help them pay arrearages, which that way half their paycheck or more isn't being taken every time they get a job. And that money goes directly to that mother and to that family that needs that help the most. So I come here with that lived experience of, waiting for that child support check to hit my account to help me with my son. And I know that many, many other mothers are in the same situation because they need that money to help themselves and help their families. So that's one of the things that I'm looking at trying to do with the American Recovery Act funds that we get.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. That's awesome. And I really appreciate that both you and Mayor Scott really speaking about a number of things that are in this MBK equity framework that was launched yesterday, which is talking about the need for data, talking about the need for you as leaders setting the vision as mayors and holding people accountable, talking about specific policies and programs that you're putting in place that are needed. And each of you are speaking to like infrastructure, like whether it's the children's cabinet or offices you're creating. And so I'm wondering if those mayors and other municipal leaders are listening to all of this and they're like, well, it seems like Baltimore and St. Louis, they're so much advanced than we are. How do I get started? You know, I can't do all of that. And so I'm wondering if you have some guidance for mayors or other municipal leaders. Or here's how you can get started. Here's what you can do like right now to get started. And wondering if Mayor, did I go Mayor Scott first or Mayor Jones? I'm gonna ask Mayor Jones first this time to go first to kind of see what would you say to your colleagues about how to get started?
Well, this work isn't easy. There is the messy part of actually bringing people to the table with those lived experiences to offer their ideas. And so we did that with a special appointed board to look at stimulus funds and how do we spend the first direct. Well, we're doing the first $50 million or so in direct need, and so they met for weeks and had subcommittees and put together a list of recommendations that we'll be releasing soon on how do we get as much money out the door as quickly as possible to people who need it most. But that work is messy. It requires people to take notes. It requires people to make sure they're following whatever public meeting laws that you have. And it requires people to put all of that data together. And you have to have a sense of who those people in your community are and try to bring as many of those people to the table as possible without it getting unproductive. And so there's a huge balancing act, but I will say over and over and over again that it is worth it in order to get a comprehensive plan on how you're going to go forward. But the work is messy. It's a labor, but it's a labor of love because the reward on the other end is definitely worth the work.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that, Mayor Jones. And I appreciate the acknowledgement that this is not going to happen overnight, but you've got to be some intentionality about who needs to be at the table if you're going to do this work, if we're going to have real change. So thanks for naming that. Mayor Scott, how about you? What would be your advice to mayors or other city council members, municipal leaders about how they could get started?
Leon, there's a couple things I want to say. First, I want to talk about what you just said, that this is not going to happen overnight. And I think it's important for elected leaders, municipal leaders, government leaders to understand that, right? That we have to understand and come into this work, understanding that someone has to be the foundation builder. When you think about work around building better cities or working towards improving the lives of young men and boys of color in our cities and across the country, right? We're at the foundation, and the person who puts the bricks at the bottom of the building, it's just as important as the one that puts it on the top. They have to understand that. As the mayor said, this is messy work. And if you're at the bottom foundation period, you are not going to get all the credit. So if you're trying to do it for that, don't do this work. But when you're going through this work, you have to start first. Don't make the mistake that so many people make. You cannot try to help improve the lives and outcomes of a section of people if they are not informing what you're doing from the beginning. The first thing you have to do is bring young men and boys of color to the table and hear from them, right? I actually just finished wrapping up the Youth Summit 3 days last week, where we did 2 in person and 1 virtual, to hear directly from our young people about everything that they think that they need. So that can inform what I'm doing, not just from an MBK standpoint, but the entire city government. You have to listen and hear from them. I always say that you get groups and, philanthropy, government, they run up to these young brothers and tell them, cut their hair, take care of their kids, go back to school, do all these things, change their music, don't get gold teeth in their mouth, and try to solve all their problems. And then they don't do the basic things. What's your name? What's going on with you? How can I help you? What do you want to be in life? What do you want to achieve? What do you see what's wrong with the city? That's the kind of mentality you have to take. And then you have to leverage, cultivate, and support partnership through the power of your office, because for everyone it might not mean that they need to have a local office. It might be better for some other places to have it be outside of city government, but use the power of your office to make sure that that work gets done.
I love that, Mayor Scott, and love the fact that you really called out the importance of centering the voices of our young boys and men of color. And that is so critical in the MBK equity framework that got released, which is like, what does it look like that to center their voices? And I know both Mayor Jones and Mayor Scott, that's at the core of who you are as you think about your own leadership. And so I'm wondering, in that space, as we talk about the intentionality for mayors and municipal leaders that are doing this work in centering the voices of our boys and men of color in this work, what guidance, because there's so many of our young men of color that are on these calls now, and what guidance do you have for them, you know, as they think about working with their mayors or working with their council members, and they might be looking at it and they might be saying, well, as they listen to you and Mayor Jones and Mayor Scott's like, well, my mayor's not like that, right? And then they're feeling like, how do I work with my mayor? They see you got, they might see, they feel your commitment, but they're now trying to figure out how they get their mayors and their council members to get engaged. And to love what kind of guidance you can give them about, you know, what it means to still engage in this space and holding their mayors accountable or city council members accountable as they go back to their own cities. So love for you to be able to speak to that. And I'm going to start with Mayor Scott this time.
Yeah, thank you, Leon. The first thing I would say to all the young people is be your true authentic selves, right? That's the most important thing. I always say consistently to my staff, if they want to keep me happy, make sure that I spend about 4 or 5 hours a week minimum with young people, because I know I'm going to get the true authenticity of the city. And also be very mindful of adults, no matter how young or old they are, who might try to impress upon you what they think you want. No, when you are trying to advocate for yourself, advocate for what you know to be true. No one knows what's better and what you need and what's going on with you and your counterparts like you. And use that. Put pressure on us, right? I tell our young people all the time, put pressure on me, reach out to me. And this is in the world that we live in now. There's no way that they can escape you. Everything is on Zoom. All of them have social media accounts. All of them clearly have email accounts. Make sure that you're demanding from them. But also when you come to me. I always tell them, when they come to me, you come and meet with me, make sure we can talk about action things that we can talk about today, things that we can talk about in the midterm, and things that we can talk about long term. And we all will be committed together. We're never going to agree on everything. I don't want anyone to always agree with me. You as the younger folks are not this monolithic group that always agree, but know that we can iron sharpens iron, and we can be better by pressuring each other. I'm going to challenge you. Your mayor should challenge you. You should challenge your mayor, so that we can collectively be better.
Yeah, I love that. Bring your true authentic self into your space. I love that. Mayor Jones, your thoughts?
Wow, I can't add much more to what my brother Mayor said. I tell kids all the time, show up as your authentic self every day, because you don't have time to try to be like somebody else. And I know it's been mentioned over and over and over again, but the people closest to the pain should be closest to the power. The people closest to the pain also should be closest to the solution, right? Closest to the problem, closest to the solution. So you have to bring those voices to the table. And just like Mayor Scott says, come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. I say that to my staff all the time. If you're going to bring me a problem, bring me a few options on how we can solve it, and we'll work through it together. And for those out there who don't have mayors like us, who center our young people in decision making, push them to do so, but push them to do so in a respectful manner. One of the things about social media, unfortunately, is that people come at you real disrespectful sometimes. And I'm sorry, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. So if this is what you want, something that your mayor should do, put together a small plan, bring it to that mayor, and then be the one responsible for helping them implement it.
Yeah, no, and I know we're in the final, we're wrapping up here soon, but I think part of what Mayor Jones just kind of spoke to is in the space of cancel culture, right? And I'm wondering, as you as mayors lead this work, even as you're thinking about some final reflections here, like if you could maybe speak to that, and maybe there's advice both or reflections that you have for those that are listening about how to navigate this, if you really are committed to seeing systems change and transformation, like how to navigate this work and doing it in a way that actually leads to meaningful change. And I love to maybe have both Mayor Jones and Mayor Scott as you reflect on that, even as we're wrapping up here, giving some final reflections. So Mayor Jones.
Yeah, so I think I already mentioned that you got to be respectful. And I think you also have to have patience because we didn't get to this situation overnight. The things that our people are experiencing in this country have happened over the last 400 years since we've been here. So I hope it doesn't take 400 years for us to get out of it. But we didn't get here overnight, and so have some patience with the process, because I like to say these are large ships, like cruise ships, and when you see those cruise ships turn, they turn real slowly. So you'll have to have patience as you're working with your mayors, your city council to move that, because just 5 years ago, closing the workhouse, which is a horrible jail here, was seen as something that was impossible. But when I got into office, after 5 years of work with the activist community, with people to get me in office, one of the first things I did was zero out their budget. So we will be on track to closing it next month or in July. So, you have to keep working at it, and eventually that ceiling will break, or that ship will turn, and it'll start to turn in the direction you want it to go.
Thank you for that. Mayor Scott?
Yeah, I think that Mayor Jones has hit the nail on the head. When we're talking about this kind of change that we're bringing, we have to understand that it's up to us, mayors like her and I, to do this work and start that work, but we also have to do it in a responsible manner. And everyone has to understand and respect that, because when you're talking about, Mayor talked about it earlier, we announced a month ago that we are starting our 911 diversion, right? We have like 13,000 911 calls in Baltimore City that could be handled by our behavioral health institutions in the city that has Johns Hopkins Hospital. And we're starting a pilot program to do that with 1,000. And, we have some folks online, Mayor Jones and other places, where they're like, well, why aren't you just doing all 13,000? And we have to walk people back a little bit and say, well, the system isn't ready for that. The folks who are doing the behavioral health work, that do their crisis response, they're partnering with us because we need to make sure that we get it right. We can't rush to do it and mess it up, because then we'll end up right where we started. We started out back to people say, well, oh yeah, this is why we can't do that. And when you're talking about the way that, especially the discourse for people online, and this is something I always want to say, particularly to young people, if you wouldn't say it to their face that way, don't tweet it, don't Instagram it that way. Because we know in our communities, right? We know, I see it here, folks here, you have to be mindful of that, because also you run the risk of people judging and looking at you the same way that they were looking at the people that were online supporting the imposter of a president that we had for 4 years. You have to be very mindful of that and be respectful, because I always tell folks that at the end of the day, when this is over, I'm going to be Brandon from Park Heights in Northwest Baltimore. I'm not going to be mayor forever. And I have to be able to go back to my neighborhood and go in my city, throughout my city today, and people still treat me with that respect and understanding, because this is not overnight work, but also you have to always keep a sense of yourself. You have to respect everybody, even those that you disagree with respect, so that they will do the same to you.
Powerful. Yeah, and I really appreciate those. If that phrase, if you can't say it to their face, don't tweet it, don't put it out there, right? And that's such a good measure to kind of hear while also just acknowledging this work is a journey. I really appreciate that reference, Mayor Jones, to really acknowledging this work does require some patience, but it also recognizes this healthy tension. The work and voices of our young people, our young men of color, need to push on the system. They need to challenge. If you're not pushing and challenging the system, change won't happen. It won't just come from the inside. So your voices matter, and how you leverage those voices, particularly when you have mayors like Mayor Jones and Mayor Scott creating tables for your voices to be heard. And this is not just a moral thing. This is good governance. This is about creating safer, healthier, more prosperous communities. So really appreciate the time and space that we've had to be able to have this dialogue. Again, Mayor Scott, Mayor Jones, so grateful for the time that you've had to share with us. And thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you both.
All right, I will turn it back over to Alejandra. Thank you. Again, thanks Alejandra, Senegal. You guys are doing great. Love your leadership.